Hello and welcome to an NBA Academy podcast. I'm Big Italy 42 here, teaching you with some strategies, giving you some ideas, and trying to help you out with some bankroll management, all the tips you might need to be successful in NBA DFS. And this particular podcast is going to focus on game selection. Game selection is a very underrated part of playing daily fantasy sports, and a lot of people think if you're a winning player, you're just going to win no matter what contests you play. And while that may be true for successful players that are going to have more success than your average player, of course, game selection is key to maximize your bottom line, raise your floor, while also giving you a nice ceiling for upside there as well. So starting off here, obviously bankroll management is key. Different players play different ways. Some players play more conservatively. The general rule is 10% of your bankroll. I, in my time, have been more of a conservative player at times, playing roughly 8 to 10% depending on the slate. Obviously, a smaller slate, you want to cut down on your volume. There's more variance. There's less of an edge to be had in, say, a 4 or 5 game slate as opposed to an 8, 10, 12 game slate. So smaller slates, definitely encourage that you play a smaller amount. But generally speaking, right around 8, 10% is a strategy, and you want to spread that around across all your sites. So, for instance, if you have a $10,000 bankroll, you want to play around $1,000. It's not $1,000 per site; it's $1,000 total. Maybe you focus on one particular site, but either way, definitely bankroll management is the ultimate key to long-term DFS success. Now, I'm talking about specific game selection. First off, head-to-head contests, and the number that you want to play. The percentage you want to play is subjective. Some people like to play lots of double up. Some people like to play head-to-heads. I'm going to give you my take here. And I like to give myself a high volume of head-to-head games because it does raise your floor. For instance, if you're playing a 50-50 or a double up, the cash line is always the same, regardless of how many opponents are in the double up. I mean, it's within a few points. You know, for instance, if you're playing a 100-man double up, your cash line is 285 points. You play head-to-head games, your cash line's not necessarily going to be 285 points. So if you're playing high volume in 50-50 and double ups as opposed to head-to-heads, then you're not going to have as high of a floor. Because say you end up in the 275 range, which isn't a terrible score, but it was a high-scoring night. Chances are you play head-to-heads, you're going to beat some people, raise your floor, give yourself that bottom line that's going to help your bankroll sustain for a little bit longer, and maybe quite a bit longer, because a lot of times head-to-heads, you can pick up games from very inexperienced players that are going to be scoring much, much lower. Also, another key thing here is rake. Rake and head-to-heads, and this depends on your side, of course. For instance, on a FanDuel game, the rake on a head-to-head is, on a $5 matchup, pays out $9, which means that FanDuel gets $1 or 10%. If you're playing a $535 head-to-head, your payout is $1,000, meaning at $70 or 6.54% goes to FanDuel and rake. So as you get up higher in your head-to-heads numbers, the rake is lower. Obviously, the higher stakes players are the ones who are playing those. Obviously, most players aren't playing a $535 head-to-head. But that's just to give you an idea. Once you do up your stakes, depending on your site, there is generally a lower rake there as well. Here's an example of rake in a big double up on FanDuel. $5 buy-in, $50,000 prize pool, 11,363 max entrants. If you take the buy-in, $5 times the number of entrants, you get 56,815, which means the rake in this one, $6,815. Then there's a nice formula in here that gives you exactly how to do that to determine the rake. The rake there in this particular contest, and I used an NFL one as an example. There weren't any NBA games posted, but the rake is very similar in these contests. It's 11.99% rake. So you're seeing just about a 2% increase in rake. So if you're playing a higher volume in head-to-head games as opposed to double-ups, you're going to have a higher bottom line as you move forward in the long term, because that 2% doesn't seem like very much, but it certainly adds up over time, and especially if you're losing that 2%. It's just a small number, it seems, minuscule thing, but if you're playing hundreds, if not thousands of games per day or per week, this number can mean a whole lot to you in the long run. So keep that in mind there. Next up, 50-50 and double-up contests. It's very important, especially in NBA, to be aware and be cognizant of the popular plays, the chalk plays. And what I mean by those are, the plays that everyone is on. For instance, you get a point guard that's hurt. The backup point guard is going to be a popular play because generally speaking, they're going to be very, very cheap. You see a guy like Kevin Durant is out. Russell Westbrook, obviously, with a huge usage rate. you're going to be playing Russell Westbrook. He's going to be a very, very popular play. Also, shorter slates. There's going to be a couple of plays that really stand out, especially shooting guard position on FanDuel. You have to play two. So a lot of times there aren't two great shooting guards, and you kind of are almost forced into playing the same two shooting guards as everyone else on a given slate. So obviously each slate is different, but it's very important to know who the value plays are, how to determine those value plays, and make sure you don't miss out on those, because if you're fading those plays in cash games, it's rarely a winning proposition in NBA. And when you get guys that are very highly owned, you need to have them for a few reasons. Obviously for production, but obviously if it's a substantial value with one of these players, you don't have them. Even if that player does not produce, you may have spent more money at that same spot, that same roster spot, and you may end up with similar or even worse production, and then you're not only setting yourself even or behind with everyone else, but you've spent more salary, which means the rest of your roster is going to be lacking. So it's very, very important to pay attention to that. And ultimately, 50-50 and double-up contests can be profitable, but you need to make sure you have at least the awareness of these popular plays. I'm not saying you always have to play them, but a lot of times in NBA, DFS, you have to play certain players. I mean, if you've been an experienced player, you'll realize that. And I mean, it's not hard to figure out who those players are going to be on a given night there as well. Next up, GPP contests, and we're going to talk about the chalk plays here for a minute, because in MLB, NFL, other sports, a lot of times you can fade the chalk play. You fade your Troy Tulowitzki at shortstop, or you fade your Chris Ivory, whoever it may be, an elite value play at an NFL, whoever it may be, and you can get away with that in these terms. But that's not necessarily the case in NBA DFS. When you're looking at it, if they're elite value plays, they're especially at a position that isn't particularly deep, like a shooting guard position, then you certainly want to still have some exposure to these guys. So it's not necessarily like the other sports where you want to have 5% less ownership across the board. That's not necessarily a winning strategy in NBA DFS. So be aware of those plays, stick those guys in, use that money to get yourself some off the wall type of plays there as well. But you also need to be very aware of how much you're playing in GPP contests. It can be very intriguing. You see the big prize pools, you see 50 grand, 100 grand for first place. What you want to do when you look at these is you want to realize how much you're spending and your percentage chance of winning. Obviously, roughly 20% pays out in these contests. So 80% of people roughly are not going to win money in these games. So if you're aware of that, you realize over the long term, you're going to lose more GPP entries than the ones that you win. But when you take a cautious approach with it and play, 10% of the amount that you're playing, maybe 15% depending on who you are. Some people play up to 25% in GPPs. I'm more of a 10 to 15% player myself. You want to leave plenty of money for your cash games to raise your floor in case your lineups do not cash in your GPPs. That way you aren't losing money or even just breaking even. I've seen a lot of times people, great cash game lineups, they almost sweep the board, in the money on almost everything in their cash game lineups, but they played so many GPPs, didn't cash in those or min cashes, and then you're breaking even or not winning any money. That's not a winning strategy in the long term. So definitely make sure that you're spreading that out. So for instance, I give an example here. If I'm playing $1,000 on a given night, play about 10% or $100 in GPPs, about 90% or $900 in cash games. Like I said, this is just my personal preference. People play 15, 20, even 25% a lot of times. But of that $900 I'm playing in cash games, I'm going to play about 70% of it in head-to-head games, and I'll play another 20% in double-ups or 50-50s there. So it's important, like I said, keep in mind, bankroll management, first things first, got to be smart with that. And you want to play consistently, because if you're choosing different game selection each day, one day you're playing a bunch of triple-ups and quintuple-ups, the next day you're back to 50-50s, that's not a winning strategy in the long term. We need to be consistent, play the same percentage each night, also play the same type of contest each night, because that way it raises your bottom line. You have the same type of contest, same entries each day. You have success, more often than not, you're going to win money. When you start your variance a lot of times with these things, and this isn't working, I'm going to change up my strategy. It's definitely good to adapt when you need to, but when you change what you're playing from night to night, then it's definitely going to lower your bottom line. And over the long term, you could win half the time and lose half the time and still lose plenty of money off your bankroll. So definitely be smart with your bankroll. If you got any questions about this, you can ask me at BigItaly42. Check out our forums. All of our experts are in there. More than willing to help there as well. Hopefully this helped you out, and we got more to come here in the NBA Academy series. We'll see you next time.